Book 15. The Trojans had retreated through the palisade and trench of beaten army, and had halted beside their chariots, their faces pale with terror, when Zeus awoke on Ida's summit with Hera by his side. He jumped to his feet and saw the Trojans being routed by howling Greeks, with Poseidon lord among them, and Hector lying on the plain, his friends crouched around him while he gasped for breath in a haze of pain and vomited blood. It was no flyweight Greek who had hit him. The father of gods and men felt pity for him, and, scowling at Hera, delivered this speech. Hera, you scheming bitch, this trick of yours has taken Hector out and routed his army, and you may be the first to profit from your plot. When I whipped the living daylights out of you. Or don't you remember when I strung you up with anvils hanging from your feet and gold, unbreakable bands on your wrists? You dangled in the air among the clouds, and all the gods on high Olympus protested, but none could come to your rescue. If anyone tried, I'd send them sailing off our balcony. There wouldn't be much left when he hit the ground. Even so, my heart still ached for Heracles, you and Boreas, whose squalls you suborned, had maliciously driven him over the desert sea and brought him later to the Greek city of Kos. I got him out of there and led him back to bluegrass Argos after many labors. I remind you of this so you'll quit playing games and see where this gets you, making love to me the way you did just now, and tricking me. The ox-eyed lady stiffened at this, and she feathered her words home carefully. All right, I swear by earth and heaven above, and the subterranean water of Styx, the greatest and the most awesome oath a god can swear, by your sacred head and by our marriage couch, upon which I would never perjure myself, that it is not by my will that Poseidon is hurting the Trojans and helping the Greeks. He's acting of his own free will, out of pity for the beating of the Greeks that the Greeks are taking by their ships. But I would advise him to toe the line and follow wherever you lead, dark cloud. Zeus, the father of gods and men, smiled at this and issued a swift reply. Well, my ox-eyed lady, if your mind really were to be the same as mine, Poseidon would find it difficult not to follow us. So, if you mean what you say, go back now to the gods and send Iris here and Apollo, she to go down to the bronze-coated Greeks and tell Lord Poseidon to desist from the war, and Phoebus Apollo to rouse Hector to fight. Breathe strength into him again, so that he may forget the pain that now distresses him, and drive the Achaeans back once more in flight. So shall they flee in panic and fall dead among the hollow ships of Peleus' son, Achilles, who will send forth his comrade Patroclus, whom illustrious Hector will kill with his spear before Ilium, after Patroclus himself has killed many a youth, among them Sarpedon my son. In wrath for Patroclus, Achilles will kill Hector. From that time on I shall cause the Trojans to be driven back from the ships until the Greeks capture steep Ilion through Athena's counsel. But until that time comes, I will not cease from my wrath or allow any immortal to bear aid to the Danaans until the desire of the son of Peleus is fulfilled, as I promised at the first, with a nod of my head, on the day when Thetis begged me by my knees to honor Achilles, sacker of cities. White-armed Hera was obedient to his word and went from Ida's mountains to long Olympus. The thought of a man who has seen the world travels quickly to any spot on the globe when he wishes he were there. So Hera flew with the speed of desire and came to Olympus. She found the immortal gods assembled in the house of Zeus. When they saw her, they were quick to toast her arrival. She ignored them all, but did take a cup from lovely Themis, who had run up to greet her, and who now addressed her with winged words. Hera, why have you come? You look so upset. Zeus must have really frightened you, your own husband. The goddess, ivory-armed Hera, replied, Don't get me started, Themis. You know yourself what a bully he is and how stubborn. No, let's get on with the feast, and you will hear along with the others what Zeus means to do. It's not very pretty, and I rather doubt that anyone, mortal or god, will be pleased, or if anyone will still have an appetite left. Hera composed herself and sat down. The god's mood darkened. Hera smiled with her lips, but her dark brows were tense, and at last she burst out indignantly. We're all simpering idiots to be angry with Zeus. We all want to get to him, to talk him down, to beat some sense into him, but does he care? He doesn't even notice. No, he sits apart, secure in his supreme almighty power. You'll just have to take whatever grief he dishes out to you. I'm afraid that now it's Ares' turn to suffer, seeing that his son, whom he loves more than any mortal man, his dear Ascalaphus, has died in battle." When Ares heard this, he smacked his muscled thighs with the flat of his hands and wailed out loud, "None of you Olympians can blame me now if I go to the Greek ships and avenge my son, not even if I am to be blasted by Zeus and lie among corpses in the blood and dust." And he ordered his sons Panic and Rout to yoke his team while he buckled on armor. The hostility between the gods and Zeus would have reached new heights then, had not Athena, afraid for them all, jumped from her throne, sped through the door, and disarmed Ares. She plucked the helmet from his head, the shield from his shoulders, took the stiff bronze spear from his hands, and gave the furious war god a tongue lashing. "Are you out of your mind? Didn't you hear what Hera just said, or don't you care? Do you want more trouble than you can handle? Forced to crawl back to Olympus yourself and sowing disaster for the rest of us? He'll leave the Trojans and Greeks, you know, and come back here to raise hell with us, mauling us all in turn, guilty or not. So please, get over your anger for your son. Better men than he have been killed or will be. Human offspring are hard to save." Ares gave in and sat back down on the throne. When Hera called Apollo out of the palace, and Iris too, the immortal messengers, and said to them in a quick flurry of words, "Zeus wants you to go to Ida immediately. When you arrive, you will look upon his face and do whatever he orders you to do." Having said that, Lady Hera turned away and sat down on her throne. The pair darted off and came to Ida, mountain mother of beasts, and found Cronus's son on Gargaran Peak, sitting in a wreath of fragrant cloud. They stood respectfully before the face of Zeus, and his mood brightened when he saw how promptly the two of them had obeyed his wife's words. He addressed Iris first, with words on wings. "Go, swift Iris, to Lord Poseidon, and tell him this is as true messenger. Bid him cease from war and battle, and go off to the other gods or to the bright sea. If he is inclined to disregard my words, have him consider in his mind and heart that, strong as he is, he cannot withstand my onset, since I am mightier by far and elder born. Yet he has the gall to claim he is equal to me, whom all the other gods dread." He spoke, and Iris was off in a blur of wind, moving down Ida's mountain to holy Troy, like snow or hail flying from the clouds under a cold blast from the brilliant north. So Iris flew with the speed of desire and confronted the glorious Shaker of earth. "A message for you, blue-maned sea god. I come here from Zeus, who bears the aegis, and who bids you cease from war and battle, and go off to the other gods or to the bright sea. If you are inclined to disregard his words, he threatens to come here himself and wage war against you, and he strongly advises you to avoid his hands, since he is mightier by far and elder born. Yet you have the gall to claim you are equal to him, whom all the gods dread." The Earth Shaker made this angry reply. "He may be strong, but this is outrageous, to force me, his peer, to stop against my will. We three brothers, whom Rhea bore to Cronus, Zeus, myself, and Hades, lord of the dead, divided up the universe into equal shares. When we shook the lots, I got the gray sea as my eternal domain, Hades the nether gloom, Zeus the broad sky with clouds and bright air. Earth and high Olympus remain common to all. I will not follow Zeus's whims. Mighty as he is, let him remain content with his third share, and not try to frighten me as if I were a coward. Better for him to threaten his own children with abusive language, the sons and daughters he begot himself, who will listen because they must." And Iris, her feet soft in the offshore wind. "Is this the message, blue-maned sea god, I should take to Zeus, this hard, unyielding speech? Will you not relent, as noble hearts often do? You know how the Furies always side with the elder." And Poseidon Earthshaker answered her, "That is very well spoken, Iris. It is good when a messenger understands how things are. But bitter pain comes to my heart and soul whenever anyone attacks an equal, a peer of equal status, with angry words. Although I am offended, I will yield for now. But I say this, and make this threat from my heart. If, in spite of me and Pallas Athena and Hera and Hermes and Hephaestus Lord, he spares steep Ilion, and is not willing to lay it waste, nor give power to the Greeks, he can be sure of eternal strife between us." And with that Poseidon left the Greek army and dove into the sea. They missed him sorely. Cumulus clouds piled high on Ida's summit. Zeus turned and spoke to Apollo. Go now, Phoebus, to bronze-clad Hector. Tremendous Poseidon has gone into the sea that laps the earth, avoiding my precipitous wrath. Too bad. The fight would have been legend, even among the gods below with Cronus. But it was better for us both that he yielded before me, angry and indignant as he was. It would not have been settled without some sweat. At any rate, take the tasseled aegis in your hands and shake it over the Greeks to rout their heroes, and see to Hector yourself. Fortify him until the Greeks have run back to their ships on the Hellespont. I'll take it from there, and see the Achaeans get some breathing space. Apollo did not obey his father's words. He came down from Ida's peaks like a falcon that bloodies doves in flight, swift on the wing, and found Hector, light of Troy, sitting up. He no longer lay down and catching his breath. He recognized his friends, and his gasping and sweating had stopped, since Zeus now had a mind to revive him. Apollo stood close and said, Hector, son of Priam, why are you sitting here apart from the rest, scarcely alive? What is wrong? Hector's helmet shone in the light. He said weakly, Which god are you, questioning me face to face? Haven't you heard that while I was killing his friends at the rear of the ships, booming Ajax hit me in the chest with a stone and took the fight out of me? I thought I would see the dead in Hades' house this very day after I had breathed forth my last. And Apollo, lord of bright distances, Courage, the son of Cronus has sent me from Ida to help and stand by you. No one less than me, Phoebus Apollo, the gold sword, who has in the past saved both you and your steep citadel. Come now and rally your many charioteers to drive their horses against the hollow ships. I will go ahead and smooth all the ground for the chariots, and I will turn the Greek heroes. And he breathed strength into the man who tended Troy's army as a shepherd his flock. Picture a horse that has eaten barley in its stall, breaking its halter and galloping across the plain, making for his accustomed swim in the river, a glorious animal, head held high, mane streaming like wind on his shoulders. Sure of his splendor, he prances by the horse runs and the mares in pasture. That was Hector, knees and feet like wind, as he rallied the chariots. He had heard the god's voice. And the Greeks? Hunters and hounds have been hot on the trail of an antlered stag or a mountain goat, but a sudden sheer rock or a tangled wood saves the animals which was not theirs to catch, and their shouting brings a bearded lion into their path. Then the eager hunters turn back. Hordes of Greeks had been advancing relentlessly, carving their way forward with spears and swords, but when they saw Hector patrolling the ranks, they tensed up with fear and stopped in their tracks. Thoas assessed the situation for them. This man, son of Adramon, and by far the best of the Aetolians, was not only good with javelin and sword, but very few Greeks of his generation could vie with him when the young men debated. Now he addressed the Greek command. Is this a miracle my eyes are seeing? Hector has risen from the dead. At least we all hoped he had died under Ajax's hands. One of the gods has delivered Hector again, and he's going to go doing what he's always done, cut the legs out from under many Danaans, since he's not standing out there as a champion contrary to the will of thundering Zeus. Now listen to what I say we should do. Let's have the troops fall back to the ships, and have all our best take a stand here, so we can hit him first and push him back with a phalanx of spears. That should stop him from being so eager to get to our troops. They heard him out and did as he said. The leaders of this action were big Ajax, Idomeneus, Teucer, Meriones, and Meges. Collecting a few good men, they took up a position opposite Hector as the main troops fell back to the ships. The Trojans attacked en masse. Hector out front, advancing with long strides, and before him Apollo, shining, his shoulders capped with cloud, the aegis he bore in his hands, a shaggy electric glow. This the craft of Hephaestus, and given to Zeus for the routing of armies. But now Apollo bore it in his hands before the Trojan army. The tight knot of Greeks met him then, and a shrill cry rose from each side. Arrows jumped from bowstrings, and spears hurled by bold hands either stuck in young men fast, but not fast enough, in battle, or stopped halfway before touching white skin and stood quivering in the ground, lusting for flesh. As long as Apollo held the aegis still, Soldiers on both sides were hit and went down. But when he looked the Greeks full in the face and shook the aegis and yelled as only a god can, he shriveled their hearts and they lost their nerve. They became like cattle or a flock of sheep when a pair of wolves attacks them at midnight, out of the darkness, and no herdsman is near. These pathetic running Greeks panicked by Apollo, who gave all the glory to the Trojans and Hector. The fighting was scattered man to man. Hector took out Stichius and Arcesilaus. One was leader of the bronze-shirted Boeotians, the other a comrade of the hero Menestheus. Aeneas's victims were Medon and Iasus. Medon was a bastard son of Oileus and Ajax's brother, but he lived in Phylace, far from his homeland, because he had killed a relative of Areopagus, his stepmother, whom Oileus had married. Iasus, an Athenian captain, was son of Sphelus Bocolides. Polydamas took out Mecestius, Polites killed Echius in the forefront of the fighting, and Clonius fell to brilliant Agenor. Paris got Deiochus from behind, hitting him below the shoulder as he ran back through the front lines and driving the bronze home. While they were stripping the armor from these, the Greeks were crowding madly into the trench, against the stakes, and by sheer pressure through the wall. Hector called to the Trojans, making his voice carry, "Forget the spoils and go for the ships. If I catch any man hanging back on this side, he's dead on the spot with no family funeral. Dogs will tear his body apart before the city." He brought the whip down on the horses' backs and called to the Trojans along the ranks. They answered his shout and held their horses even with his. The noise was deafening. Before their rolling chariots, Phoebus Apollo danced on the banks of the trench and pushed the earth into the cavity, making for them a causeway, as wide as a field for the javelin throw. They poured over it rank after rank, Apollo leading the way with the priceless aegis, and casting down the Achaean wall with ease. A child playing on the seashore will build the sand into fantastic shapes, then gleefully knock them down with his feet. Yes, Apollo, all that Achaean toil went down like sand, and you made them run all the way back to their ships. Stopped by the line of vessels, they cried out to each other, but mostly to the gods, lifting their hands, each man praying, and Nestor of Gerenia praying the hardest, hands outstretched to the starry sky. "Father Zeus, if ever any man of us burned to thee in wheat-bearing Argos, fat thigh bones of bulls and of rams, and prayed to return, and thou didst promise and nod thy head, remember it now and deliver us, O God of Olympus, from the day of doom, nor allow the Achaeans thus to be vanquished by the men of Troy." Zeus heard the old man's prayer, and the sky pealed with thunder. But when the Trojans heard the rumbling overhead, they redoubled their efforts against the Greeks. Far out at sea a huge wave washes over the gunwales of a ship driven by a gale, and the wind is whipping the waves even higher. The Trojans shrieked as they rushed over the wall, driving their chariots into the Greek camp to fight at the ship's sterns with bladed spears. They from their cars, the Greeks from the decks of the tarred ships to which they had climbed, and from which they fought with the long naval pikes they had on board for battles at sea, huge jointed poles armed with bronze tips. And Patroclus, all during the fight for the wall, which took place some distance from the beached ships, sat in the hut of Eurypylus, his wounded host cheering him up with small talk and rubbing ointments onto his ugly wound to ease his dark pangs. But when he saw the Trojans rushing onto the wall and the Greeks beating a noisy retreat, he groaned and slapped his thighs with his hands, saying, "Eurypylus, I know you're hurting, but I can't stay with you here any longer. A big fight is brewing. Have your man take care of you. I'm off to see Achilles to try to talk him into fighting. God willing, I may be able to persuade him. Persuasion works when it comes from a friend." As Patroclus ran off, the Greeks withstood the Trojan onslaught, but could not push them back from the ships, even with their superior numbers, nor could the Trojans break their resistance and get into the middle of the ships and huts. The battle was stretched as taut as a carpenter's cord snapped onto a beam to mark a straight line, so even was the tension along the line of ships, though at each ship there were different engagements. Hector had made straight for Ajax. Ajax stood as if scissored out of the sky on a black ship, and he and Hector now fought for that ship, Hector trying to push him back and burn it, Ajax holding him off. Neither could do much about the other, so Ajax cast and hit Caletor, son of Cleitius, who was bringing up fire. He fell heavily, the torch dropping from his hand. He was Hector's cousin, and when Hector saw him go down in the sand before the ship, he called to the Trojans and Lycians, "Stand your ground and fight for Clytius' son. Don't let the Greeks strip him of his armor just because he has fallen by the ships." As he spoke, his spear flashed toward Ajax, missing him, but hitting Lycophron, Master's son, and one of Ajax's lieutenants, who lived with him because he had killed a man in sacred Cythera. Hector's spear caught him above the ear as he stood near Ajax, and he fell backward from the ship's stern. He was dead when he hit the ground. Ajax stiffened, and he said to his brother, "Teucer, we've lost a good, true friend, Lycophron, whom we honored as we did our parents when he came from Cythera to live with us. Hector killed him. Where are your arrows and the bow that Phoebus Apollo gave you?" Teucer lost no time in coming up to him, with his strung bow and quiver of arrows, shooting rapid fire at the Trojans. He hit Cleitus, who was the son of Pisenor and Polydamas's friend, as he drove, busy with the reins, into the thick of battle, rendering service to Hector and the Trojans, none of whom could help him now. The arrow whizzed into his neck from behind, and he fell from the chariot. The horses swerved, rattling the empty car. Polydamas saw it all and got to the horses first, handing them over to Astinus, son of Proteon, with strict orders to hold them close and keep an eye on them. Polydamas then returned to the front. Teucer drew out another arrow, this one for Hector, and it would have stopped that hero from fighting by the ships if it had only hit him and taken his life. But Zeus, who protected Hector, was watching closely and robbed Teucer of his glory, breaking his twisted bowstring just as he was drawing it against Hector. The bronze-armored arrow was shunted aside, and the bow dropped from his hand. Teucer shuddered, and he said to his brother, "Damn, so much for our battle plans. Some god is cutting them pretty short," knocking the bow from my hands and snapping the new string I tied on this morning, so it would hold up to repeated rounds. Telamonian Ajax answered him, "That's too bad, but leave your bow and stash of arrows here, since a god has tampered with them and begrudged us their use. Pick up a spear, get a shield on your shoulders, and battle the Trojans that way. They may beat us, but they're not going to take our ships without a fight. Let's keep our minds on what we have to do." So Teucer laid his bow up in his hut. He put a four-ply shield around his shoulders, and on his mighty head a helmet crafted with a horsehair plume that nodded grimly. And he took a stout spear tipped with bronze and ran to take his place at Ajax's side. When Hector saw Teucer's arrow fail, he called to his men and made his voice carry. "Trojan, Lycian, and Dardanian soldiers, remember to be the warriors that you are in this fight for the ships. My eyes have seen the shafts of one of their best blasted by Zeus. It is easy to see whom Zeus protects, to whom he gives glory and grants the victory, and whom he lays low and will not protect, even as now he lays low the Argives, and gives his protection to us. So close your ranks and fight along the ships, and if any of you is hit and dies, then so be it. Death in defense of your homeland is no dishonor. Your wife is safe, and your children's future, your house and estate are inviolate, if the Greeks sail off to their own native land." With these words he raised their spirits, and Ajax did the same for the Greeks. "Shame on you, Argives! It's do or die now. If Hector takes the ships, do you think we'll all be walking home? Didn't you hear him screaming at his men to burn our fleet? He's not inviting them to a dance, you know. Our only strategy is this, to take them on, hand to hand, our muscle over theirs. Better to get it over with, live or die, than to be strung out here along the ships, picked to death by inferior men." This bolstered their spirits, and the killing began. Hector took out a Phocian commander named Schedius, Perimedes' son, and Ajax killed Laodamas, an infantry captain and son of Antenor. Polydamas laid low Otus of Cyllene, a commander of Meges, the Epean commander. Meges saw this and jumped at him, but Polydamas ducked and Meges missed. Apollo would not allow Polydamas to be killed in the front lines, but Meges did kill Chroesmus with a thrust to the chest. Chroesmus fell heavily, and as Meges got busy stripping his armor, Dolops, who knew what to do with a spear, rushed at him. This man was the grandson of Laomedon, and the son of Lampus, his bravest son and a furious fighter. His spear ground through Meges' shield from close range, but the corslet saved him, the intricate plaited corslet he wore. His father, Phyleus, had brought it home from Ephyre on the river Celius, having received it from Lord Euphetes, a guest friend, to protect him in war. It now saved his son's life. Meges struck back and got a spear onto Dolops' bronze helmet, shearing the horsehair plume from its socket. The whole plume, bright with its fresh scarlet dye, fell in the dust. Meges continued fighting, his still confident opponent, until Menelaus came up to help him, unnoticed by Dolops, standing slightly behind him. Menelaus heaved his spear through Dolops' shoulder, and the spear, with an eager life of its own, punctured his sternum. Dolops fell on his face, and his two antagonists moved to strip him. But Hector called to his many kinsmen, beginning with Melanippus, Hicetaon's son. This man used to pasture his shambling cattle off in Percote when there was no enemy near. But when the curved prows of the Danaans appeared, he moved back to Ilion, a distinguished Trojan, and lived in the house of Priam, who treated him as a son of his own. Hector prodded him now. Melanippus, are we going to slack off like this? Don't you have any feeling for your dead kinsmen? Look at how they are handling Dolops' armor. Come on, we can no longer fight the Greeks from long range. Either we kill them, or they take Ilion's heights and murder our people. Melanippus went with him, moving like a god, and Telamonian Ajax urged on the Greeks. Be men, my friends, and show some shame. You should feel shame before each other in battle, before more men with shame are saved than are slain. There's no glory or power in shameless fight. They were already eager to ward off the enemy, but they took his words to heart and fenced in the ships with a hedge of bronze against which Zeus urged on the Trojans. Then Menelaus, good at the war cry, shouted to Antilochus, Antilochus, there is none of us younger, faster, or braver than you in battle. Get moving, and take some Trojan out. Menelaus melted back into the ranks when he said this, but he inspired Antilochus, who jumped out into no man's land. With a quick look around, he hurled his spear. The Trojans recoiled from the flare it made, but the throw was not wasted. It hit Melanippus, Hicetaon's high-hearted son, right in the chest, beside his nipple. As he came into battle, he fell heavily, and the light left his eyes. Antilochus was all over him. A dog goes after a wounded fawn a hunter hits with unerring aim as it jumps from its lair. That was how Antilochus leapt at you, Melanippus, to strip off your armor. But Hector saw him and came running over to meet him in battle, and Antilochus, for all his speed as a combatant, fled. A marauding animal that has killed a hound or a drover beside his herd will sometimes flee, even before the crowd of men has gathered. As Nestor's son Antilochus was running, Hector and the Trojans showered him with a whining barrage of missiles. He didn't turn and stand until he reached his own lines. It was then that the Trojans, like lions who have tasted raw meat, charged the ships and completed this part of Zeus's design. He steadily turned up the Trojans' intensity and softened the Greeks' resolve to win. Hector would win all the glory, for now Priam's son would burn the beaked ships with fire from heaven and so fulfill the last syllable of Thetis' prayer. It was for this that Zeus waited, the glare from a burning ship. From then on, he would will the Trojans back from the ship and shift glory to the Greeks. With this intent, he roused Hector against the hollow ships, and Hector needed no urging. Hector raged like the war god, the spear wielder, fire that consumes a wooded mountainside, foam flecking his mouth, eyes burning under fierce brows, and the helmet encasing his face a sinister glitter. As Hector fought, as Zeus himself shed a cone of light from the ether around the solitary warrior, but only for this brief moment. Pallas Athena was hastening his doom under Achilles' hands. Yes, Hector was eager, but for all his efforts, probing the Greek lines where he saw the greatest concentration of fine weapons, he could not break their ranks. They were as solid as a wall, or an iron cliff that drops sheer into the gray sea and withstands whistling winds and swollen waves that break against its rock face. The Greeks were not going to budge, so Hector, with a nimbus of fire around him, leapt high and fell upon their bulk. Waves driven by wind sometimes reach tsunami proportions. When one breaks over a ship, the entire vessel is hidden by foam, and the wind roars like devils in the sail. The crew shudders, and their hearts turn to ice. So narrow is their passage out of death. So too the Greeks, under Hector's charge. A maleficent lion charges a herd of cows, grazing in the bottomland of a great marsh. There is no counting how many, and with them is only a single herdsman, inexperienced at contesting a heifer's carcass with a wild beast. The herdsman walks at the front of or rear, but the lion attacks in the middle and is soon feeding on its kill. The others stampede off. It was marvelous to see the Greeks scattering before Hector and Father Zeus, even though Hector killed only one man, Periphetes of Mycenae, the son of that Copreus who used to shuttle messages from Eurystheus to Heracles. His son was better in every way, whether it came to running or fighting, and he had one of the best minds in Mycenae. Now he yielded the glory to Hector. As he turned, he tripped on the rim of his own shield, a Mycenaean style that went down to his feet, and protected him from spears, but not from himself. As he stumbled and fell backward, his helmet ringing like a gong in his astonished ears. Hector was quick to take advantage, putting a spear into his chest before his watching comrades were able to react. They grieved for their friend, but were too afraid of shining Hector to help him. The Greeks regrouped within the ship's perimeter, but the Trojans kept coming. The outermost ships were conceded, but the Greeks did take a stand by their huts. They were massed now, too afraid to speak out through the camp, and they kept calling back and forth to each other. Nestor of Gerenia, the old general, implored them all in the name of their parents. Fight like the men that you are, my friends, and feel some shame before the men around you. Remember your children, your wives, your possessions, and your parents, whether they are dead or alive. For the sake of those who are not here, I beseech you to stand firm and fight, and not retreat. This helped, but Athena helped them more, pushing aside the wondrous cloud of mist from their eyes. Light flooded in from both sides, from the ships behind and the battlefield in front. They could all see Hector now and his men, the entire Greek army, from the idol in the rear to the champions in front, could see the enemy. Ajax decided it was time to make his move. Separating himself from the rest of the Greeks, he boarded a ship and strode along its deck, wielding a long pike made for naval warfare, some 40 feet in length, joined with iron rings, and then, as skillfully as a stunt rider jumps from horse to horse as his chariot, drawn by a team of hand-picked thoroughbreds, speeds from plain to city down a highway lined with spectators who cheer him on. Ajax leapt from ship to ship, and his voice, like a shock wave from the wide blue sky, admonished the Greeks to defend their ships and the huts clutched beneath them. Hector reacted quickly, a streak of bronze armor flashing out from the general sea of bronze. Like a golden eagle dive-bombing down to a river bank where a flock of wild geese or cranes or long-necked swans are feeding. Hector made like that for a dark, proud ship, and a great hand reached down from Ida and pushed him on, and his army with him. The fighting began again beside the ships, so keenly you would have thought the troops on both sides were fresh and had just entered battle. Their minds were different, though. The Greeks fought as if they would never get out of this battle alive, while every Trojan heart beat with the hope of burning the ships and killing Greek heroes. Such were their thoughts as they faced off in battle. Hector laid hold of the stern of the ship, a beautiful vessel that had brought Protesilaus over to Troy, but would not bring him back home. It was about this ship that the Greeks and Trojans fought in close combat. Instead of withstanding assaults from arrows and javelins in flight, they fought toe-to-toe here, of one heart in battle, hacking at each other with axes and hatchets, enormous swords and double-edged spears, many fine blades, and, with black leather ferrules, fell to the ground, some from the hands, others from the shoulders of men as they fought. The earth flowed black with their blood. Hector, once he had grasped the horn of the ship's stern, would not let go, and he called to the Trojans. Fire, bring fire, and raise the war cry all together. Zeus has given us this day as payment for everything, to seize the ships that came here against the gods' will, and have brought us endless trouble, because of the cowardice of our elders, who, when I wanted to bring the fight here, kept me back, and withheld the army. But if Zeus clouded our minds then, there is no doubt he is urging us on now. At this the Trojans intensified their attack. Ajax, battered by everything they could throw and sensing death if he stayed where he was, inched back along the 7-foot cross-plank he had been standing on and jumped from the deck. He took up a position guarding the ship, his spear point menacing any Trojan who tried to bring up fire, and his voice kept booming out alarms to his compatriots. Soldiers of Greece, be men, my friends! We have to dig in on defense now. Do you think we have allies to back us up, or some stronger wall that will protect us? There's no fortified city behind us now, with reinforcements there to turn the tide. We're out here on the plain of Troy, with the sea at our backs, far from home, surrounded by armed men. If there's a way out, it's in our hands, not in slacking off. And as Ajax spoke, his spear carved holes in the various Trojans who thought that they might please Hector by bringing fire to the ship. He mangled a good dozen at close range like this.